Before we start the story, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and at the end, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Diana Martinez wiped down the sticky bar counter for the 100th time that evening, her dark ponytail swinging as she moved. The dive bar in downtown Chicago wasn't exactly the glamorous life she'd imagined when she dropped out of Northwestern to help pay her mom's medical bills, but it paid the rent on their tiny apartment. "Another round for table 6, her coworker Jake called out, sliding empty glasses across the scratched wooden surface. Diana rolled her eyes. "Let me guess. They want the cheapest beer, but with fancy glasses because they're entrepreneurs." She made air quotes with sudsy hands. Just as she reached for the tap, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Diana almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Diana Martinez." The voice was crisp, professional, and definitely not from her usual crowd. "Depends who's asking," Diana replied, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued pouring. "My name is Margaret Chen. I work for the Wellington family. We have a rather unusual proposition for you." Diana nearly dropped the glass. "The Wellington family? As in Wellington Industries, the massive investment empire that owned half of Chicago's skyline?" Their portfolio included everything from tech startups to luxury brands. "I think you have the wrong number, lady. I'm a bartender, not a stock market genius." Margaret's laugh was polite but strained. "Actually, Miss Martinez, we contacted you because of your unique resemblance to someone very important. Could we meet tonight? The compensation would be quite generous." Diana glanced around the dingy bar where the biggest tip she'd gotten all week was $12. "How generous are we talking?" $50,000, cash, for one evening's work." The glass slipped from Diana's suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the floor behind the bar. Jake looked over with concern, but Diana was already grabbing her jacket. "I'll be there in an hour." 20 minutes later, Diana sat in the back of a luxury sedan that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years, staring at a photograph that made her stomach drop. "This is Isabel Wellington," Margaret explained, her tablet displaying a picture of a young woman who could have been Diana's identical twin. "She's the heir to the Wellington fortune, engaged to Ryan Blackstone of Blackstone Enterprises." Diana squinted at the photo. The resemblance was uncanny. Same dark hair, same green eyes, even the same slightly crooked smile. "Okay, this is seriously creepy. Are we related or something?" "We've looked into it. Apparently not. Just one of those strange coincidences." Margaret swiped to another photo showing a tall, dark-haired man in an expensive suit. "This is Ryan Blackstone. He owns a portfolio of tech companies and luxury acquisitions. Tonight he's expecting to finally meet his fiancée at an exclusive penthouse party." "Let me guess," Diana said, her sarcasm meter hitting overdrive. "Princess Isabel decided to bail." Margaret's expression tightened. "Miss Wellington has disappeared. She left a note saying she refuses to be married off for a business merger. The families have been planning this union for months. If Ryan discovers she's gone—" "The deal falls through," Diana finished. "And you lose millions." "Billions, actually. The merger between Wellington Industries and Blackstone Enterprises would create the largest investment portfolio on the West Coast." Diana leaned back against the leather seats, her mind racing. $50,000 would cover her mom's treatments for months, maybe even get them out of that crappy neighborhood. "So you want me to pretend to be some spoiled rich girl for one night?" What could possibly go wrong? Margaret handed her an iPad loaded with information. "Everything you need to know about Isabel is here. Her education at Harvard Business School, her interests in sustainable investing, her social circle. Ryan has only seen photos of her. They've never actually met in person." "Because that's not weird at all," Diana muttered, scrolling through photos of charity galas and yacht parties. "What happens when he wants to, consummate this arrangement?" The engagement is purely business. Both families understand this. You'll attend the party, meet Ryan, convince him that Isabel is suitable for the arrangement, and leave. Simple. Diana looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, where lights twinkled from penthouses she'd never dreamed of entering. And if I get caught? You won't. Ryan Blackstone is known for being rather distant, cold even. He's more interested in quarterly reports than personal connections. Just be polite, discuss some basic investment strategies, and avoid any topics that might reveal your actual background. The car pulled up to an exclusive boutique that was clearly closed to regular customers, but somehow still blazing with lights. First, we need to get you ready. Diana stepped out onto the sidewalk, her sneakers looking ridiculous next to the marble entrance. This is insane. I don't know anything about being rich. That's what the next 2 hours are for, Margaret said, leading her toward the door. By the time we're done, you'll be every inch the Wellington heiress. As they entered the boutique, Diana caught sight of herself in a floor-to-ceiling mirror. Her reflection showed a tired bartender in jeans and a Chicago Bulls t-shirt, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. In a few hours, she'd be transformed into a billionaire's fiancée. What could possibly go wrong? 2 hours later, Diana stared at herself in the boutique's mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. The stylist had worked magic. Her dark hair now fell in elegant waves around. Her shoulders, her makeup was flawless but natural, and the designer dress probably cost more than her rent. Remember, Margaret coached as they rode the elevator up to the penthouse, Isabel studied at Harvard Business School. She's interested in sustainable investing and tech startups. Her family's portfolio includes renewable energy companies and luxury brands. Diana tugged at the diamond necklace around her throat. And if he asks about specific investments, be vague. Rich people love to sound mysterious about their portfolios. Say things like, we're exploring opportunities in emerging markets, or diversification is key in volatile times. The elevator dinged softly as they reached the top floor. Diana's stomach performed what felt like a complete gymnastics routine. 50,000, she whispered to herself. Just get through one evening. The elevator doors opened to reveal a stunning penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The party was already in full swing. Men in expensive suits and women dripping with jewelry mingled around a space that screamed exclusive wealth. There he is, Margaret murmured, nodding toward a man standing alone by the windows. Diana's breath caught. Ryan Blackstone was even more intimidating in person than in his photos. Tall and broad-shouldered, he had the kind of sharp features that belonged on magazine covers. His dark suit was clearly custom-tailored, and he held himself with the confidence of someone who'd never worried about rent money. He was also staring directly at her. "Showtime," Margaret whispered, then melted away into the crowd. Diana took a deep breath and approached, trying to channel every rich girl stereotype she'd ever seen in movies. Ryan watched her approach with an unreadable expression, his dark eyes taking in every detail. "You must be Isabel," he said when she reached him. His voice was deep, controlled, with just the hint of a Boston accent. "And you're Ryan Blackstone," Diana replied, extending her hand with what she hoped was appropriate upper-class poise. "I've heard so much about your acquisition strategies." Instead of shaking her hand, Ryan lifted it to his lips and pressed a brief kiss to her knuckles. Diana's brain short-circuited for a moment at the unexpected gesture. "Your reputation precedes you as well," he said, his eyes never leaving her face. "Though I have to admit, you're not quite what I expected." Diana's heart skipped. Had she already blown her cover? "Oh, what were you expecting?" A small smile played at the corners of Ryan's mouth. "Someone more artificial, I suppose." Most people in our circles tend to be rather predictable." "Well, I've never been accused of being predictable," Diana said, grateful that was actually true. Ryan gestured toward the bar. "Would you like a drink? I hear the bartender here makes excellent cocktails." Diana nearly choked. "I'm sure they do. What would you recommend? Something sophisticated. Perhaps a martini? Or do you prefer champagne at these sorts of gatherings?" Here was her chance to show off actual knowledge. "Actually, I'd love a whiskey sour, but make sure they use fresh lemon juice, not that artificial stuff. And a good bourbon, none of that bottom-shelf nonsense." Ryan's eyebrows rose slightly. "Interesting choice. Most women I know stick to wine or champagne at formal events." "I'm not most women," Diana replied, then immediately worried she'd said too much. But Ryan's smile widened. "No, you're certainly not." He signaled the bartender, who quickly prepared her drink with obvious skill. As they moved away from the bar, Ryan gestured toward the crowd. "So tell me, Isabel, what do you think of merger opportunities in the current market?" Diana took a sip of her whiskey sour, which was perfectly made, and tried to remember Margaret's coaching. "Well, diversification is always key, especially in volatile times. I think there are interesting opportunities in emerging markets, particularly in sustainable tech." "Sustainable tech," Ryan repeated thoughtfully. "Your family's portfolio includes several renewable energy companies, doesn't it?" Panic flashed through Diana's mind. She had no idea what companies the Wellingtons owned beyond what Margaret had briefly mentioned. "We prefer to keep our specific investments private. But yes, we believe in supporting innovation that benefits both profit margins and the planet." Diplomatic answer. Ryan's tone was neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he was testing her. "I find that being too specific about investments at parties like this is a good way to end up with unwanted business proposals," Diana said, deciding honesty, even partial honesty, was her best strategy. Ryan laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "You have a point. I've learned to be equally vague about my own ventures." They were interrupted by a tall, blonde woman in a dress that probably cost more than Diana's yearly salary. "Ryan? Darling, I've been looking everywhere for you." "Hello, Victoria," Ryan said politely, but Diana noticed he stepped slightly closer to her. Victoria's calculating gaze swept over Diana. "And you must be the mysterious Isabel Wellington. I've heard so much about you, though you're quite different from what everyone described." Diana's blood ran cold. "Different how?" "Oh, just more down to earth than expected. Most heiresses I know are rather—" Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Well, let's just say they tend to be more concerned with social media presence than actual business acumen." "I prefer substance over style," Diana managed. "How refreshing," Victoria purred, clearly not meaning it as a compliment. "Ryan, you simply must tell me about your latest acquisition. I heard rumors about a private jet company." Ryan's expression cooled noticeably. "Business discussions can wait for business hours." "Victoria." Victoria laughed, a sound like tinkling glass. "Of course. Well, I'll leave you two to get acquainted." She drifted away, but not before giving Diana another appraising look. "Sorry about that," Ryan said quietly. "Victoria Sterling tends to insert herself into conversations where she doesn't belong." "She seems intense," Diana said diplomatically. "She's been trying to convince me to merge our companies for years. She doesn't handle rejection well." Diana sensed an opportunity to learn more about the real situation. "And you're not interested in merging with Sterling Industries?" Ryan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I prefer partnerships based on mutual respect rather than aggressive pursuit. Your family's approach has been much more civilized." The weight of what she was participating in hit Diana again. These weren't just business deals. They were people's lives, futures, entire companies hanging in the balance based on tonight's performance. "Ryan," she said carefully, "what are you hoping to get out of this arrangement between our families?" He studied her face for a long moment. "Honestly, I expected this to be a purely transactional relationship, beneficial for both our portfolios, but nothing more. And now I'm wondering if I might have been wrong about that." The sincerity in his voice made Diana's chest tighten with guilt. This man was developing real feelings for someone who didn't exist. Before she could respond, the lights dimmed, and a live jazz band began playing on a small stage at one end of the penthouse. Couples began moving toward an improvised dance floor. "Would you like to dance?" Ryan asked, offering his arm. Diana hesitated. Dancing meant being close to him, continuing this charade when she was already in deeper than she'd planned. But $50,000, her mother's medical bills, their tiny apartment with the leaky ceiling and broken heater. "I'd love to," she said, taking his arm. As Ryan led her onto the dance floor, Diana tried to ignore the way her heart raced when he placed one hand on her waist and took her other hand in his. She tried to ignore how perfectly they seemed to fit together, how easy it was to follow his lead. And she definitely tried to ignore the voice in her head that whispered she was in serious trouble. The jazz band played something slow and sultry as Ryan spun Diana expertly around the makeshift dance floor. For someone who was supposedly all business, he certainly knew how to dance. "You're full of surprises," he murmured, pulling her closer. "Most people I know learn ballroom dancing at expensive academies. You have a more natural style." Diana's heart hammered against her ribs. "I believe in learning from real experience rather than formal instruction." It wasn't entirely a lie. She'd learned to dance from her grandmother, who'd taught her salsa steps in their tiny kitchen every Sunday after church. But somehow she doubted that was the kind of experience Ryan was imagining. "Tell me something about yourself that's not in any business profile," Ryan said as they swayed to the music. "Something real." The request caught Diana off guard. Everything about tonight was fake. Her name, her background, her reasons for being here. But something in Ryan's dark eyes made her want to give him at least one true thing. "I love thunderstorms," she said quietly. "When I was little, I used to sneak out onto the fire escape during storms and just watch the lightning. My mom thought I was crazy." Ryan's smile was soft, genuine. "That doesn't sound crazy at all. It sounds like someone who appreciates power and beauty, even when it's dangerous." The way he was looking at her made Diana's stomach flip. This was definitely moving beyond a simple business arrangement. "What about you?" she asked, desperate to shift focus away from herself. "What's something real about Ryan Blackstone that doesn't involve portfolios or acquisitions?" "I restore vintage motorcycles," he admitted, looking almost embarrassed. "I have a workshop in my garage where I spend most weekends taking apart engines and putting them back together." Diana blinked in surprise. "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Golf? Yacht racing? Other rich guy hobbies?" Ryan laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I do own a yacht, but I rarely use it. Too many people trying to network and make deals. The motorcycle workshop is the only place where I can just think." "What do you think about?" "Lately? Whether I'm building the right kind of life?" The honesty in his voice made Diana's chest ache. Here was this incredibly successful, powerful man, and he sounded as uncertain about his choices as she felt about hers. The song ended, but neither of them moved to leave the dance floor. They stood there, swaying slightly, Ryan's hand still on her waist. "Isabel," he said quietly, "I have to admit something. I wasn't looking forward to tonight." "Why not?" "Because I assumed this whole arrangement was just another business transaction. Two families merging assets with us as the convenient symbols. I thought you'd be—" He paused, searching for words. "Boring? Fake? Only interested in my bank account?" Diana supplied. "Yes, actually." His thumb traced a small circle on her waist, making her breath catch. "But you're not any of those things." Guilt crashed over Diana like a cold wave. If only he knew how fake this all was. "Ryan, I should tell you something." "There you are." A voice interrupted, and Diana turned to see an older man in an expensive tuxedo approaching with a woman who had to be his wife. "Ryan, my boy, I've been wanting to introduce you to some potential investors from overseas." Ryan's expression shifted back to polite business mode, but Diana noticed his hand remained on her waist. "Of course, Senator Morrison. Isabel, I'd like you to meet Senator John Morrison and his wife Catherine. Senator, this is Isabel Wellington." "Ah, the famous Wellington heiress." Senator Morrison pumped Diana's hand enthusiastically. "We've heard wonderful things about your family's investment strategies, particularly your recent moves in the tech startup sector." Diana's mind went blank. She had no idea what tech startups the Wellingtons had invested in recently. "We prefer to keep our portfolio details private," she managed. "Smart policy," Catherine Morrison said approvingly. "Though I did read an interesting article about your family's acquisition of that artificial intelligence company. Fascinating stuff." "AI is definitely the future," Diana said vaguely, hoping they couldn't hear her heart pounding. "Indeed." Senator Morrison launched into a lengthy discussion about technology investments and government regulations. Diana nodded and smiled, contributing generic comments when necessary, while mentally calculating how much longer she needed to maintain this charade. Finally, the Morrisons moved on to corner other potential donors. Diana slumped slightly in relief. "You handled that well," Ryan observed, "though you seemed nervous." "I don't love talking business at social events," Diana said, which was absolutely true. "I prefer to get to know people as individuals first." "Another thing we have in common." Ryan guided her toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Most people at these events only see dollar signs when they look at me." "And what do you see when you look at me?" The question slipped out before Diana could stop it. Ryan turned to face her fully, his dark eyes serious. "Someone I'd like to know better. Someone who might actually understand what it's like to have people make assumptions about you based on your family name." The irony was almost too much to bear. Diana pressed her lips together to keep from laughing or crying. "Isabel," Ryan continued, stepping closer, "I know this arrangement was made by our families, but I'd like to think we could make it into something real, something that's ours, not theirs." Diana's throat constricted. This beautiful, complicated man was falling for a woman who didn't exist. And despite every logical reason not to, she was falling for him too. "Ryan, excuse me." Margaret Chen appeared at Diana's elbow, her professional smile not quite hiding the urgency in her eyes. "Miss Wellington, your mother is on the phone. She says it's urgent." Diana's blood turned to ice. Her actual mother was at home, hopefully asleep after another round of chemotherapy. Margaret was clearly trying to extract her from a situation that was getting too complicated. "Of course," Diana said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Ryan, I'll be right back." "Take your time," he said softly. "I'll be here." Diana followed Margaret toward a quiet corner of the penthouse, her mind racing. The night was supposed to be simple. Show up, play a role, collect her money, and disappear. But nothing about Ryan Blackstone was simple. "We need to leave," Margaret whispered urgently. "Now." "Why? What's wrong?" "The real Isabel Wellington just posted on her Instagram from Paris. If anyone sees it and starts asking questions—" Diana glanced back at Ryan, who was watching her with concern from across the room. "Just give me 5 more minutes." "Absolutely not. This was already risky enough. But if someone realizes—" "5 minutes," Diana repeated firmly. "I need to say goodbye properly." Margaret's expression was grim, but she nodded. 5 minutes, then we're gone. As Diana walked back toward Ryan, she tried to figure out how to end this without completely breaking his heart, or hers. But how do you say goodbye to someone you never should have met in the first place? Diana returned to Ryan with her heart in her throat and a practiced smile on her face. He immediately noticed something was wrong. "Everything all right?" he asked, stepping closer. "You look pale." "Family emergency," Diana said, hating how easily the lie came. "I'm afraid I need to leave soon." Disappointment flickered across Ryan's features before he masked it with polite concern. "Nothing serious, I hope." "Just business complications that require immediate attention." Diana glanced around the penthouse, trying to memorize the way the city lights reflected in the windows, the way Ryan looked in his perfectly tailored suit. In 5 minutes, this would all be a memory. Of course, family business comes first. Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "Before you go, could I get your number? I'd like to continue our conversation when you're free." Panic shot through Diana's chest. My phone was damaged earlier, but you can reach me through my family's office." "Right." Ryan looked puzzled, but didn't push. "Isabel, I want you to know that tonight has been—" "Unexpected," Diana supplied. "Perfect," he said quietly. "I haven't felt this connected to someone in years, maybe ever." The sincerity in his voice was like a knife to Diana's heart. She was about to disappear from his life, leaving him to wonder what he'd done wrong when Isabel never called. "Ryan," she started, then stopped. What could she possibly say? That she was a bartender from the wrong side of Chicago who'd taken $50,000 to lie to him? That every moment between them had been built on deception? "What is it?" he asked gently. Before Diana could respond, Victoria Sterling appeared again, this time with a tablet in her hands and a triumphant expression. "How interesting," Victoria purred, holding up the screen. "I was just scrolling through social media and found the most fascinating post." Diana's blood turned to ice as she saw what was on the tablet. A selfie of the real Isabel Wellington at a cafe in Paris, clearly taken within the last hour. The caption read, "Found the perfect. Little bistro in Montmartre. Sometimes you just need to escape family expectations and find yourself." Paris life, Janker freedom. The color drained from Ryan's face as he stared at the image, then at Diana, then back at the image. "That's curious," Victoria continued, clearly enjoying herself. "Because if Isabel Wellington is in Paris, then who exactly have you been talking to all evening, Ryan?" The penthouse seemed to tilt around Diana. Conversations nearby slowed as people began to notice the commotion. Ryan's dark eyes locked onto hers, confusion and hurt warring in his expression. "I can explain," Diana whispered, but even she knew how ridiculous that sounded. "You can explain," Ryan repeated slowly, "how you're Isabel Wellington when Isabel Wellington is clearly in France." Margaret appeared at Diana's side, her face pale but determined. "Miss Wellington, the car is waiting." "Miss Wellington?" Ryan's voice was deadly quiet. "Is that even your real name?" Diana opened her mouth, but no words came. How could she explain that she'd taken money to break his heart, that everything he'd felt tonight had been based on a lie? "Who are you?" Ryan asked, and the betrayal in his voice made Diana want to disappear into the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." She turned and fled toward the elevator, Margaret close behind her. Behind them, Diana could hear Victoria's delighted laughter and the low buzz of shocked conversations. "Wait!" Ryan's voice called after her. but the elevator doors were already closing. As they descended toward the lobby, Diana pressed her back against the elevator wall and tried to breathe. In the space of 30 seconds, everything had fallen apart. "The car is outside," Margaret said quietly. "We'll have you home in 20 minutes. "He knows," Diana said numbly. "He knows I lied about everything. You did what you were hired to do. None of this is your fault." But Diana knew that wasn't true. She'd been hired to play a role for one evening, not to develop real feelings for a man she could never have. She'd been hired to maintain professional distance, not to dance with him and share pieces of her real self. She'd been hired to be fake, and instead, she'd found something terrifyingly real. The elevator reached the lobby, and Margaret hurried her toward the waiting sedan. But as they stepped outside, Diana heard footsteps behind them. "Stop!" Ryan's voice commanded. "Please." Diana turned to see him in the lobby doorway, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened. He looked like he'd run down 20 flights of stairs. "Ryan, don't," Diana said. "Just let me go. Not until you tell me who you are." He stepped closer, and Diana could see the hurt and confusion in his dark eyes. "Not until you explain why you pretended to be someone else." "Miss Wellington, we really need to leave," Margaret urged. "Miss Wellington," Ryan repeated with bitter irony, "is anything about tonight real? Your name, your background, your interest in sustainable investing. Ryan, did you even mean it when you said you weren't like most women I know? Or was that part of the act too?" The pain in his voice broke something inside Diana's chest. "My name is Diana Martinez," she said quietly. "I'm a bartender from Chicago. I needed money for my mother's medical bills, and your business partners offered me $50,000 to pretend to be Isabel Wellington for one night." Ryan stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. "You're a bartender?" "Yes." "And you've never heard of sustainable investing or emerging market portfolios?" "Not until today." "But the way you talked about whiskey, about thunderstorms, about learning from real experience." Ryan's voice trailed off. "That was real," Diana said desperately. "The dancing, the conversation, the way I felt when—" She stopped herself before she could make things worse. "The way you felt when what?" Diana looked at Margaret, who was practically vibrating with anxiety, then back at Ryan. "The way I felt when you looked at me like I was someone worth knowing." For a moment, something soft flickered in Ryan's expression. Then his business mask slammed back into place. $50,000, he said flatly. "That's what my feelings were worth to your employers." "Ryan, please understand." "I understand perfectly." His voice was cold now, distant. This was all a transaction, even the parts that felt real. "No," Diana said fiercely. "What happened between us tonight, that wasn't fake. I may have lied about my name and my background, but I didn't lie about how you made me feel." Ryan studied her face for a long moment. "How do I know what's real and what's performance? How do I know you're not still acting?" Diana felt tears prick her eyes. "Because I'm about to walk away from the best night of my life, and if I were still acting, I'd find a way to stay." The lobby fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic outside. Ryan's expression was unreadable, and Diana realized she was holding her breath. Finally, he stepped back. "Goodbye, Diana Martinez." The dismissal in his voice was final. Diana nodded once, then followed Margaret to the car, leaving Ryan standing alone in the marble lobby. As the sedan pulled away from the curb, Diana caught one last glimpse of him through the rear window. He stood perfectly still in the bright lobby lights, watching them disappear into the Chicago night. "The money will be transferred to your account tomorrow," Margaret said quietly. Diana nodded, unable to speak. She'd gotten what she came for, enough money to help her mother, to pay their bills, to maybe even move to a better apartment. So why did it feel like she'd lost everything? 3 weeks later, Diana stood behind the bar at Mickey's Tavern, mechanically mixing drinks and trying to pretend her life hadn't completely changed. The $50,000 had cleared her mother's medical debt and given them a financial cushion they'd never had before. She should have been happy. Instead, she felt hollow. "Earth to Diana," Jake called, sliding empty glasses across the bar. "Table 12 wants another round of beer, not a philosophy lesson on the meaning of life." Diana blinked, realizing she'd been staring into space while polishing the same glass for 5 minutes. "Sorry, long day." "Long 3 weeks, more like," Jake observed. "You've been acting weird ever since that night you left early." "Did something happen?" Diana forced a smile. "Just family stuff. All good now." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her mother's health was improving. They'd moved to a decent apartment in a safer neighborhood, and Diana had even started taking online business courses with the leftover money. By every practical measure, that night at the penthouse had changed her life for the better. So why couldn't she stop thinking about Ryan Blackstone? She'd tried to forget him, deleted every news article about Blackstone Enterprises from her browser history, avoided the financial district where his office building towered over downtown Chicago, even switched to different radio stations when business news came on. But late at night, she still remembered the way he'd looked at her during their dance, like she was the only person in the room. She remembered his laugh when she'd made that joke about unwanted business proposals. Most of all, she remembered the hurt in his dark eyes when he'd realized who she really was. The bar's TV was tuned to a local business channel, providing background noise for the usual crowd of after-work drinkers. Diana was pulling a beer tap when a familiar name made her freeze. Blackstone Enterprises announced today that the proposed merger with Wellington Industries has been officially canceled. Diana's head snapped up to stare at the screen, where a business reporter was standing outside a familiar-looking office building. Sources close to both companies cite irreconcilable differences in strategic vision, though some insiders suggest the breakdown began at a private social event 3 weeks ago. The beer overflowed the glass, foam spilling across the bar. Diana quickly shut off the tap, her hands shaking. Ryan Blackstone, CEO of Blackstone Enterprises, was unavailable for comment, though representatives say the company will be pursuing other acquisition opportunities in the coming quarter. Diana grabbed a towel and mopped up the spilled beer, her mind racing. The merger had been canceled because of her, because she'd ruined Ryan's first meeting with his supposed fiancée, leaving him to discover the deception in the most humiliating way possible. "You okay?" Jake asked, noticing her pale face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Diana lied. "Just tired." But she wasn't fine. She'd destroyed $1 billion business deal and probably Ryan's faith in honest relationships. The money in her bank account suddenly felt like blood money. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mom. "Deanna, Mia, could you pick up groceries on your way home? And thank you again for everything. I don't know how you managed to get that bonus at work, but it's changed our lives." Diana's throat tightened. Her mother thought the money had come from a bartending bonus. She had no idea her daughter had spent an evening lying to a good man for cash. The bar's door chimed, and Diana looked up to see a familiar figure in an expensive suit. For a wild moment, her heart leaped, thinking Ryan had somehow found her. But it was Margaret Chen, looking as polished and professional as ever. "Miss Martinez," Margaret said, approaching the bar. "Could we talk?" Diana's stomach dropped. "If you're here about the money, I haven't spent it on anything frivolous. My mom's medical bills." "This isn't about the money," Margaret interrupted. "Could we speak privately?" Diana glanced at Jake, who was handling the other customers. "My break isn't for another hour." "I'll wait." Margaret ordered a glass of wine and sat at the far end of the bar, occasionally checking her phone, but mostly just watching Diana work. The scrutiny made Diana nervous, and she found herself dropping things and fumbling with orders. Finally, Jake waved her toward the back room. "Go take your break. You're making me nervous, and I'm not even the one being stared at by the scary business lady." Diana untied her apron and joined Margaret at a corner table away from the other customers. "How's your mother?" Margaret asked without preamble. "Better. The treatments are working." Diana studied Margaret's face, trying to read her expression. "Why are you here?" "The Wellington family is facing some complications." "Such as?" Margaret pulled out her tablet, swiping to a news article. Isabel Wellington was photographed leaving a rehabilitation facility in Switzerland yesterday. Apparently, her disappearance wasn't just about avoiding an arranged marriage. She's been struggling with addiction issues. Diana scanned the article, which showed photos of a thin, pale young woman who looked nothing like the vibrant socialite from the earlier pictures. "The family is concerned about their public image," Margaret continued, "and about Isabel's well-being, of course. They've decided to postpone any major business negotiations until she's recovered." "Okay," Diana said slowly. "What does this have to do with me?" Margaret leaned forward. "Ryan Blackstone has been asking questions." Diana's heart stuttered. "What kind of questions?" "About you. He's hired a private investigator to find out who you really are, where you work, why you agreed to the deception. He already knows who I am. Diana Martinez, bartender, needs money for medical bills. He knows your name and occupation, but he doesn't know about your mother's cancer, or how desperate you were that night, or that you've used every penny to pay for treatments." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "He doesn't know that you're taking business courses online, or that you moved your mother to a better neighborhood so she could be closer to her doctors." Diana stared at her. "How do you know all that?" "Because I've been keeping track. The Wellington family wanted to ensure their investment in you didn't become a liability." "Investment," Diana repeated flatly. "Is that what I was?" "You were a solution to a problem, and you performed admirably under difficult circumstances." Diana pushed back from the table. "If you're here to offer me another acting job, the answer is no. I won't do that to someone again." "Actually," Margaret said, "I'm here to offer you a different kind of opportunity." She slid a business card across the table. Diana picked it up, reading the embossed text. "Wellington Industries, Junior Investment Analyst." "What is this?" "A job offer. Real this time. The Wellingtons were impressed by your quick thinking that night, your ability to discuss investment strategies despite having no formal training. They think you have potential." Diana stared at the card. "You want to hire me? After what happened?" "We want to hire you because of what happened. You walked into a situation where you were completely out of your depth, and you held your own against seasoned business professionals. That takes intelligence and instincts that can't be taught. But I don't have a business degree. I barely finished high school. The job comes with educational opportunities. You'd attend Northwestern part-time for your MBA with full tuition coverage. Starting salary is $90,000 a year, plus benefits that would cover your mother's ongoing medical care." Diana's head spun. It was everything she'd dreamed of but never thought possible. A real career, education, security for her and her mother. "There's just one condition," Margaret added quietly. "Which is?" "Ryan Blackstone can never know about this conversation, or about the job offer. If he's going to find you, it has to be because he wants to, not because we've orchestrated another meeting." Diana looked down at the business card, then back at Margaret. "You think he's going to look for me?" "I think," Margaret said carefully, "that a man doesn't hire a private investigator to find someone he wants to forget." Hope fluttered in Diana's chest before she ruthlessly squashed it down. Even if he finds me, what then? I lied to him about everything that mattered. Why would he want anything to do with me? Maybe because some things can't be faked, Margaret suggested. The way you two looked at each other that night. That was real, wasn't it? Diana's throat tightened. It doesn't matter. I hurt him. I made him feel like a fool in front of all those people. People recover from hurt feelings. It's much harder to recover from regret. Margaret stood, leaving the ETA business card on the table. Think about it, Diana. You have a chance to build the life you actually want, not just the one you're settling for. As Margaret walked away, Diana stared at the card in her hands. A real job, a real future, a chance to become someone worthy of a man like Ryan Blackstone. But was it already too late? Her phone buzzed with another text from her mom. Mia, you work too hard. When was the last time you went on a date? Life is too short not to take chances on love. Diana almost laughed at the irony. She'd taken a chance on love, all right. Now she just had to figure out if it was worth taking another one. 2 months later, Diana sat in her new office at Wellington Industries, reviewing quarterly reports and trying to concentrate on portfolio diversification strategies instead of the private investigator's business card tucked in her desk drawer. Ryan's investigator had found her 3 weeks ago, a polite woman who'd asked careful questions about Diana's background and motivations. Diana had answered honestly, figuring she owed Ryan that much. But since then, nothing. No phone calls, no unexpected visits, no sign that Ryan was planning to act on whatever information he'd gathered. Maybe Margaret had been wrong. Maybe he just needed closure, not reconciliation. Diana was deep in analyzing a tech startup's financial projections when her assistant knocked on her door. Ms. Martinez, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal. Diana's heart stopped. Did he give a name? Ryan Blackstone. Diana's hands went numb. After weeks of wondering, he was actually here, in her building, probably in the lobby right now. Should I tell him you're in a meeting? Her assistant asked gently. Diana took a shaky breath. Number, send him up. She had 5 minutes to prepare for a conversation she'd been rehearsing for months. Diana quickly checked her reflection in her computer screen. Professional blazer, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked like exactly what she was, a junior investment analyst trying to build a legitimate career. The knock on her door came too soon. Come in. Ryan stepped into her office, and Diana's breath caught. He looked exactly the same. Tall, intimidatingly handsome, impeccably dressed. But there was something different in his dark eyes. Less anger, more uncertainty. Hello, Diana. Ryan? She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Please, sit down. He remained standing, his gaze taking in her office. The framed business degree she was working toward, the financial publications on her bookshelf, the photo of her and her mother at their new apartment. Nice office, he said finally. Thank you. I'm still getting used to it. Investment analyst. He read her title from the nameplate on her desk. That's quite a career change from bartending. Diana lifted her chin. I discovered I have an aptitude for financial strategy. Did you? There was something almost amused in his tone. Before or after you convinced a room full of business professionals that you understood sustainable investing. Heat flooded Diana's cheeks. I've been studying, taking courses. This job is legitimate, if that's what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. Ryan finally sat down, his long legs folding elegantly. I'm just trying to understand how the bartender who needed $50,000 for medical bills became a Wellington Industries analyst in 2 months. Diana's throat tightened. My mother's cancer treatments are expensive, but you're right. The timeline is unusual. Unusual? Ryan leaned back in his chair. That's one word for it. They stared at each other across her desk, years of hurt and confusion hanging between them. Diana had imagined this conversation 100 times, but she'd never figured out how to explain the complicated truth of her situation. "Why are you here, Ryan?" "Because I've spent the last 2 months trying to forget you," he said quietly. "And I've discovered that's impossible." Diana's heart clenched. "Ryan, let me finish." He held up a hand. "I hired an investigator because I needed to understand what happened that night. Whether any of it was real, or if I'd completely imagined the connection between us." "What did you learn?" "That Diana Martinez works 2 jobs to pay for her mother's chemotherapy. That she moved her family out of a dangerous neighborhood as soon as she could afford it. That she's taking online business courses and plans to finish her MBA in 3 years. Diana's eyes stung. "So now you know. I wasn't lying about needing the money." "No, you weren't." Ryan leaned forward. "But you were lying about other things." "Such as?" "You told me you loved thunderstorms because you used to watch them from a fire escape. But your investigator report says you grew up in a ground-floor apartment." Diana blinked in surprise. "That's actually true. We lived on the 2nd floor until I was 12. The fire escape faced west, so you could see storms coming across the lake." "Oh," Ryan looked slightly embarrassed. "What about the salsa dancing? The investigator said your grandmother taught you." "Also true. Every Sunday after church." Diana tilted her head. "What exactly were you trying to prove?" "That everything between us was fake," Ryan admitted. "That I'd been an idiot for thinking we had a real connection. And instead, I discovered that the woman I couldn't forget was exactly who I thought she was, just with a different name and background." Diana's chest ached with something that might have been hope. "Ryan, I'm sorry. For the deception. For the humiliation. For everything that happened after—" "The merger cancellation wasn't your fault," he interrupted. "That was my decision. Because I ruined your first meeting with Isabel. Because I realized I didn't want to marry someone I'd never met for the sake of a business deal." Ryan's dark eyes were intense. "Even if that night had gone according to plan, even if the real Isabel had shown up and charmed everyone at the party, I would have called off the engagement eventually." "Why?" "Because you can't build a real relationship on financial projections and portfolio synergies. I learned that from a bartender who pretended to be an heiress and somehow made me believe in love again." Diana's throat closed completely. "Ryan." "I know you lied about your identity," he continued. "But did you lie about your feelings?" The question hung in the air between them. Diana could give him a safe answer, something that would protect them both from further hurt. Or she could tell him the truth and see what happened. "No," she whispered. "That was real. All of it." Ryan's expression softened. "Even the part where you said I made you feel like someone worth knowing?" "Especially that part." He stood up slowly, moving around her desk until he was close enough to touch. "Diana Martinez, investment analyst, daughter of a cancer survivor, student of business strategy, and lover of thunderstorms. Yes. Would you have dinner with me? As yourself this time." Diana's heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you sure? I mean, I'm not a billionaire heiress. I don't have a trust fund or family connections or—" "You have something better," Ryan interrupted, reaching out to cup her face gently. "You have courage and intelligence and the ability to make me laugh even when you're terrifying me with your honesty." "I terrify you in the best possible way." His thumb traced across her cheekbone. "You make me want to be better than just a collection of successful acquisitions." Diana leaned into his touch, hardly believing this was really happening. "What about the scandal?" Victoria Sterling probably told everyone about that night. "Let them talk. I'd rather have one real relationship than a dozen strategic alliances. And if this doesn't work out? If we're too different? Or if... Ryan silenced her with a soft kiss that tasted like second chances and new beginnings. Then we'll figure it out together, he murmured against her lips. No fake identities this time. Just Diana and Ryan, seeing what happens when they're completely honest with each other. Diana smiled through tears she didn't remember shedding. That sounds terrifying. Good thing you like dangerous things. Like thunderstorms? Like falling in love with someone who challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself. Diana kissed him again, longer this time, until her assistant's discreet cough reminded them they were in her office with the door open. Dinner, Ryan said, stepping back, but keeping hold of her hands. Tonight. Somewhere we can talk without an audience. I know a place, Diana said. It's not fancy, but they make excellent whiskey sours. Ryan's laugh was warm and genuine. Lead the way, Ms. Martinez. I have a feeling you're going to show me a whole new side of Chicago. As they left her office together, Diana caught their reflection in the elevator doors. A billionaire CEO and a junior analyst who'd found each other through deception and chosen each other through truth. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined as a little girl, but it was something better. It was real. 1 year later, Diana stood on the balcony of Ryan's penthouse, their penthouse now, watching a thunderstorm roll across Lake Michigan. Lightning illuminated the city below, and she could hear the rumble of thunder growing closer. I thought I might find you out here, Ryan said, stepping onto the balcony with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Old habits, Diana said, accepting her mug gratefully, though the view is significantly better than it was from the fire escape. Ryan wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. How was your first day as a senior analyst? Terrifying and exhilarating. I can't believe Wellington promoted me so quickly. I can. You've worked harder than anyone else in that building. Diana leaned into his warmth, still sometimes amazed that this was her life now. The past year had been a whirlwind of challenges and changes, finishing her MBA, navigating office politics, learning to balance a relationship with 2 demanding careers. But it had also been filled with quiet Sunday mornings, motorcycle rides along the lakeshore, and dinners with her mother, who'd taken to Ryan immediately, and now regularly invited him over for traditional Mexican food and embarrassing stories about Diana's childhood. I have something for you, Ryan said, setting down his mug and reaching into his jacket pocket. Diana turned in his arms, expecting to see some small gift. He was always bringing her little things, books about investment strategies or vintage scarves from his business trips. Instead, he dropped to one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. Diana's mug slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the stone balcony. Diana Martinez, Ryan said, his voice steady despite the nervousness in his dark eyes. Will you marry me? For real this time, no fake identities or business arrangements. Just you and me, building something that's completely ours. The ring was perfect, a simple solitaire that caught the lightning flashes and threw them back like captured stars. Not flashy or ostentatious, but elegant and timeless. Ryan, Diana breathed, then found herself laughing through sudden tears. Are you proposing to me during a thunderstorm? I thought it was appropriate, given your fondness for beautiful, powerful, dangerous things. I love you, she said, dropping to her knees, so they were at eye level. Yes, obviously yes. But I need to tell you something first. Ryan's expression grew concerned. What is it? I'm not the same person you met that night. I mean, I am, but I'm also stronger, more confident. You've changed me. You've changed me too, he said softly. You've made me want a life outside of board meetings and acquisition strategies. And I want you to know that I'm not saying yes because of this penthouse, or your private jet, or your portfolio. I'm saying yes because you make me want to be brave enough to take chances. Even scary ones. Especially scary ones. Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. He probably researched ring sizes with the same thoroughness he applied to business deals. So, Diana said as they stood up together, when should we have the wedding? I'm thinking something small, intimate. No fake identities required. How about next summer? We could have it at your mother's new house. She's been wanting to show off that garden. Diana's heart swelled. In the years since they'd been together, Ryan had quietly arranged for her mother to move to a small house with a yard where she could grow vegetables and flowers. He'd never mentioned it to Diana, but her mother had let it slip during Christmas dinner. She'd love that, Diana said, though she'll probably invite half the neighborhood. Good. I want everyone to know I'm marrying the most remarkable woman in Chicago. Thunder rumbled overhead, closer now, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Diana tilted her face up to the sky, letting the water wash over her. We should go inside, Ryan said, but he made no move to leave. In a minute, Diana replied, pulling him closer. I want to remember this moment exactly as it is. They stood together on the balcony as the storm broke over the city. Two people who'd found love in the most unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something real from a foundation of pretense. Lightning flashed again, illuminating their faces, and Diana thought about the scared bartender who'd agreed to a deception for $50,000. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, this love, this man who saw her exactly as she was and loved her for it. Ready? Ryan asked as the rain intensified. Diana looked at her engagement ring, sparkling even in the dim light, then at the man who'd somehow seen through all her lies to the truth underneath. Ready, she said. Hand in hand, they ran inside, laughing and soaked to the skin, to begin planning the rest of their completely honest, beautifully real life together. What did you think of Diana's and Ryan's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss one of our stories, and stick around to watch more heartfelt tales by clicking right here on the final screen.